Good afternoon. It's Sunday, April 17th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The Golan Heights will forever remain in Israel's hands. That's the word from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is speaking today at his cabinet's first ever meeting conducted in the Golan Heights. The Prime Minister stressed that in the 19 years the Golan was under Syrian occupation, it was used for war. And in the 49 years it has been under Israeli rule, it has been used for economic initiatives, tourism, and peace. Last week, in a telephone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, the Prime Minister emphasized Israel will not accept any accord concerning the fate of Syria that specifies that the Israeli-held two-thirds of the western Golan Heights is Syrian land. The Prime Minister is expected to echo this stance at his upcoming meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin later this week. Prime Minister Netanyahu slammed the decision by UNESCO's executive board for adopting a resolution that erases Israel's ties to the Temple Mount and to the Western Wall. IBA's Margot Dudkevich has the story.
Prime Minister Netanyahu accused the UN group of trying to rewrite history, saying UNESCO ignores the unique Jewish connection to the Temple Mount, the site where two temples stood for 1,000 years and the place to which Jews prayed for thousands of years. In Paris on Friday, the 58-member executive board of the UN's Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization approved the resolution, referring to the Temple Mount as the Al-Aqsa Mosque or Haram al-Sharif, and calling the Western Wall the Al-Buraq Plaza. The board accused Israel of being an occupying power and alleged that it is taking illegal measures against freedom of worship on the Muslim site. It also blamed Israel's aggression and not the Palestinian rioters for the violence on the Temple Mount, and said Israel was planting fake Jewish graves in parts of the Muslim cemeteries, and that it had turned many of the Islamic and Byzantine remains into Jewish ritual baths and prayer places. Ahead of the Passover holiday and in an effort to prevent an upsurge in violence, Netanyahu last week reiterated his ban to all government ministers and politicians, asking them to refrain from visiting the Temple Mount compound. Jewish and Arab lawmakers were informed the site would be off limits to them. Violent clashes erupted on the Temple Mount last September, with Palestinians accusing Israel of attempting to take control of the holy site. The Temple Mount compound in Jerusalem's Old City is a frequent flashpoint, and its fate is a core issue in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is the site of the two Jewish temples, and the Muslims refer to it as the noble sanctuary where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. In an effort to calm tensions and curb violence, Israel restricts the entry of Jews on the Temple Mount, and those allowed to visit do so under strict police presence and are forbidden to pray there. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says he fully backs the French initiative to advance the peace process. Speaking during a meeting with French President François Hollande in Paris this weekend, Abbas said the move may help to alleviate the so-called suffocating of the Palestinians people under Israel's occupation. Abbas has a busy diplomatic week ahead of him. From Paris, he travels to Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He will also meet in Berlin with German Chancellor Angela Merkel before flying to New York to attend United Nations meetings. At this hour, opposition leader Isaac Herzog is being questioned under caution by police on suspicion of receiving forbidden donations, failing to report them to authorities, and submitting false testimony. The allegations against Herzog, the head of the Zionist Union Party, surfaced some weeks ago and related to alleged financial wrongdoing concerning funds he received while campaigning for leadership for the Labour Party 3 years ago. Last week, Herzog called the allegations baseless and false, but said he would cooperate with police. Police received permission from Attorney General Avichai Mendelblit to summon Herzog for questioning. Iran today paraded parts of the newly received Russian-made S-300 missile defense system in a ceremony marking National Army Day in Tehran. Several trucks showcased parts of the missile system but did not include the missiles themselves. Addressing the crowd, Islamic Republic President Hassan Rouhani declared the country's security forces are defending and safeguarding Iran's national interests and its capabilities against the arrogant powers in the region. The IDF repeatedly toned down warnings this weekend of possible escalation along tensions with the border in Gaza in the south. Senior IDF forces said Hamas was not interested in an escalation of violence and was committed to a truce with Israel. The efforts to calm down residents of communities surrounding the Gaza Strip come amid reports that Hamas was strengthening its military wing and upped its deployment along the Gaza border. On Thursday, right before the start of the weekend, sirens were sounded in the Gaza periphery kibbutz of Nahal Oz. No explosion was heard and no injuries or damage were reported. For his part, Yisrael Beitenu leader Avigdor Liberman claimed that Israel is conducting secret and indirect negotiations with Hamas in order to obtain calm. Addressing a cultural event in Beersheba on Saturday, the former foreign minister claimed Israel has transmitted dozens of messages to Hamas via Egyptian and UN mediators. He also took the current government to task, accusing it of conducting a defeatist and lax policy, saying the country's leadership is incapable of dealing with the challenges on the agenda. Responding to Liberman's comments, the Likud party released a statement accusing him of trying to become a failed political and military commentator. Well, joining us now in the studio is political analyst Caleb Ben David. Caleb, good to have you.
Pleasure to be here, Aryeh.
So Netanyahu has taken his cabinet up to the Golan Heights for a first time ever meeting of his cabinet. What's the deal here? What's going on?
Well, Aryeh, we know that the Obama administration sees a Syrian ceasefire agreement or some kind of even treaty bringing stability on a more permanent basis area. That's one of their last bits of unfinished business in the Middle East that they think they can achieve. And it is not a surprise. Remember, it's longstanding U.S. policy that the Golan, the U.S. has never recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan. So it's not really that big a surprise, especially in discussions with Russia, that reports have leaked out that any agreement on Syria would include something about the Golan.
So is that the timing? Is that why we have the timing of this? Because it's the Russian deals?
Well, I think the timing is that there is now, at least because we've had some ceasefire agreements, temporary ceasefire agreements that have been held in Syria. Several of the analysts I spoke with say there is a real momentum now for a bigger agreement. Prime Minister Netanyahu clearly, though, wants to send a message by holding this meeting. He wants to really say, this is a red line for Israel. Don't think that we're going to cooperate in any discussion about returning the Golan to a Syrian sovereignty as part of the any kind of peace treaty or agreement that you make in Syria. And let's be honest, Aryeh, politically also, it's a win-win for Prime Minister Netanyahu. He knows that polls have consistently shown that the majority of the Israeli public is against returning the Golan Heights to the Syria. Even Israelis, some of the Israelis that support a deal in the West Bank and giving the West Bank to the Palestinians, don't agree, certainly at this stage, to return the Golan to Syria, especially now at a time when people are talking about it maybe as a possible refugee, parts of it, a refugee for the Druze that are being persecuted in Syria. We've seen reports of a rise in the Druze on the Golan taking out Israeli citizenship after all these years. So it's from Israelis' perspective, it's ridiculous to even raise this issue now. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is exploiting that.
Well, the Prime Minister is going to be traveling later this week to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. What's his message there?
Well, certainly one of the big messages is what we've been saying on this Syria deal. Don't kid yourselves. We are not going to agree to any kind of steal on the Golan Heights as part of any kind of agreement that you have. And, you know, some of the remarks that Prime Minister Netanyahu, the public remarks he made about the strikes, airstrikes in Syria on Hezbollah arms transfers certainly can be linked to this whole atmosphere. The Prime Minister definitely making a strong message. But, of course, the other big issue is the S-300s that are going to Tehran. They're finally going to Iran. The Prime Minister has opposed that from the beginning, and he certainly will be telling the Russians, if you're going to do that, make sure, try to guarantee they're not going to be moved out of Iran to places like Syria into the hands of, for example, Hezbollah.
Now let's get into some domestic politics.
Sure.
The former foreign minister, Victor Liberman, the head of the Yisrael Beitenu party, has blasted the Netanyahu government, saying that they speak tough, but they do little. So he doesn't sound like a coalition partner to me.
He certainly isn't. And we've seen in recent weeks, Liberman has definitely upped his rhetoric. He made a joint appearance against the Netanyahu government. He made a joint appearance with Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid a few weeks ago, which he had not done before, criticizing the Netanyahu government. Clearly, he, at this stage, he seems to believe that if he joins the government, that would only hurt his party in the next election. He's got to create his own identity. One consequence of this, Ari, and we've talked about this issue, is that, again, Prime Minister Netanyahu should then really think about appointing a foreign minister. He's been holding out that chair for either someone like Herzog, who's now in sort of legal difficulties, political troubles, Lieberman or Lapid. Clearly, that's not going to happen. He should probably start looking at his own Likud party to appoint the foreign minister.
Well, using his foreign minister hat, Prime Minister Netanyahu blasted UNESCO for sort of backing this whole resolution that the Temple Mount was part of the Haram Sharif and sort of ignoring Israel's legacy there. So is this going to help the Palestinians when they go to the UN, let's say this week, to pass resolutions that are anti-Israel, against settlement?
I think there is a connection in that you do see this kind of flurry of anti-Israel activity at the United Nations, concurrent with renewed Palestinian efforts to get a resolution in the Security Cabinet, in the Security Council, condemning Israeli settlements. So there is this absolute flurry of there's always some degree of anti-Israel activity, let's be honest, but certainly there's a slight spiking now with the Palestinian efforts. Mm-hmm. And again, we've talked about the difficulties between the Obama administration now over Syria with the Netanyahu government. The question is going to be raised again if the Obama administration, in its last months, a year in office, is going to again be ready to veto any kind of Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlements as they have in the past. That's an issue that we're going to be looking at in the coming months.
Well, Kalev Ben David, it's a pleasure to have you, and we hope to see more of you as you soon join the IBA team as diplomatic and political analyst and correspondent. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure. I'm looking forward, Aryeh.
In an unprecedented mutiny, 38 female soldiers who served in the Army's Spotting and Field Intelligence Unit were taken before military court for violating orders. 5 were sentenced to 20 days in the brig and 15 were distanced from their base. The soldiers reportedly refused to take part in a training exercise with other units and sang protest songs. It appears some of the soldiers serving in the Field Intelligence Unit who did not take part in the uprising will pay the price. They were informed they would not be allowed out on furloughs in the coming weeks. Parents of some of the soldiers expressed anger over the disciplinary action taken against them, saying the soldiers refused to divide into groups and participate in a memory game, and it had nothing to do with their operational activities. Other parents reportedly said the soldiers were protesting the deteriorating conditions on the base and the humiliating and disdainful manner their commanding officers treated them. Prime Minister Netanyahu will travel to Moscow this week to meet with President Vladimir Putin to discuss the situation in the Middle East and key areas of bilateral relations. The two leaders will discuss regional and global issues touching on the Palestinians and the Syrian conflict. It is the second meeting between the two in recent months and occurs in the backdrop of Iran receiving from Russia shipments of the sophisticated S-300 missile defense system and a meeting between Putin and PA leader Mahmoud Abbas. It's Sunday, and in keeping with our weekly tradition, here are 5 good news stories that may help put a smile on your face and may make you feel a bit proud. Israel sends emergency aid to quake-stricken Japan. The country was among the first to dispatch rescue crews that will assist in providing disaster relief. Motorola Solution will open a new innovation center in Israel. The new endeavor will deal with cyber, analytics, mobile, internet, and technological developments that can be showcased to the world. A junior from the University of Southern California wins grand prize in a video competition that aims to entertain, educate, and inspire people about the Jewish state. Her submission, titled Superman's Got Nothing on Israel, came in first place. We'll show you part of this video towards the end of the show. First Hebrew Music Museum opens in Jerusalem's Nachlat Shiva neighborhood. The first of its kind hall exhibits some of the most unique instruments with the hope of uniting all sectors of Judaism. And finally, something sweet for dessert. Whoever said you can't have your cake and wear it too? An Israeli cake sculptor was part of a 3-woman team who created this huge, life-size, edible wedding dress cake that will be featured at the upcoming Cake International Baking Show in London. Taking a look at local finances with no currency trading on Sundays, the shekel remains the same, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up in late afternoon trading. Here's a look at the numbers. Turning to the weather, and the forecast is for more pleasant temperatures. There may be fog along the coast and the lowlands. Here are the expected highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. That's our broadcast of IBA News today. Please join us again tomorrow, when I'll be back to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem. And we leave you now with this video clip titled Superman's Got Nothing on Israel that received the top prize at the first ever Inspired by Israel video competition.
The day Superman got nothing on me. I'm only one call away.
One unit has become legendary, the Israeli medical unit.
We did everything that we can to be as fast as possible on ground.
Israel's only the world's 152nd biggest country, but it's always one of the first to send disaster relief all over the globe.
No matter where you go, no, you're not alone. I'm only one call away.
The earthquake in Haiti.
I'll be there to save the day.
The tsunami in Japan.
Superman got nothing on me.
The typhoon in the Philippines.
I'm only one call away.
Save a Child's Heart brings children with life-threatening heart defects to Israel for cardiac care.